Greetings, gamers. Tim here again, and I've tried to shoot this video a couple times. Movie Maker is having a fit. I've also tried to do live video feeds on Facebook, and that program has had a fit. And I don't know if it's a combination of my operating system and Facebook and my particular web browser, or if it's just something else going on. So I'm not going to lay blame on anything. I asked people, since I could not do the live feed that I wanted to do, what they thought of asking me questions for Hearts and Souls and me answering them. Now, about the only question I got that's actually answerable at this stage, because one person wanted to talk to me about the game, is, what is Hearts and Souls' story? Well, Hearts and Souls has got a weird name, and it's got a real name for a weird name for a reason, because at its heart, the story of Hearts and Souls is a story of why and how a character chooses to succeed at being a hero and doing good for others. It's about what are they willing to sacrifice, what are they willing to pay, and and all the drama that produces. So its story is the soap opera of your superhero character. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't have action. That doesn't mean you can't have long battles with supervillains, because I did not focus it so tightly like a laser. It's more like a big spotlight, because a laser works in very specific instances for very specific purposes, but a spotlight is a little bit broader. It's got a lot more use in lighting up an area. A laser doesn't light up an area very much. It can burn something, but so can a spotlight if it's close enough. But the spotlight is shining light on a broader area, even though it's focused. And that's what this is. It's about spotlight. And it's about a lot of different things. And I've had some good feedback, and I've had some negative feedback, and I've had some positive feedback from all sorts of different people. And I've been asking some of the people I played the game with over the course of years, what they thought about this negative feedback. And the negative feedback I got was no one likes stress. Well, no one's supposed to like stress. That's the bad stuff. That is the stuff that is saying, okay, you didn't banter, you didn't monologue, but you want a chance to not suffer getting your face smashed in by a giant robot. So you took a little bit of stress, you got out of the way, and the wall beside you got broken. Now, the idea behind that is that stress is supposed to flow reasonably enough that characters will suffer fallout at least once a game session, some fallout. Now, that's the reason there is a specific rule for when a GM can actually trigger fallout. It has to be higher than what's called the threshold. And I'll explain threshold more later. But it all boils down to Hearts and Souls is being about the story of your characters and why they want to do good and how they want to do good and what they will suffer for it. There's no meta plot. There's no great, big, overarching, game setting you have to use. I am providing a timeline for a game setting. I will be writing a source book for that game setting, and it may be a Kickstarter reward at some point, or a bonus if we break a certain level. I will write the book regardless, but whether it will be included in the Kickstarter depends on how much money is going to be made in the Kickstarter, because it's not written yet, and I have found that settings can take a lot of work, especially when you're trying to keep the setting from being the focus. In Hearts and Souls, the primary focus, is on the rules that allow you to empower your character in a superhero game to be a superhero, but a superhero from the era that I am most familiar with, which is late Silver Age, early and mid what they call Bronze Age. Some people call it the Dark Age, but I usually put the Dark Age a little bit later. The Bronze Age is a time period when Spider-Man was, in many ways, the king of comic book superheroes. And he suffered things like broken arms. He lost his powers because he had the common cold. He was always dealing with all these stressful situations, and they were falling on him like a ton of bricks. And he threw the costume away several times, only to step back up and get back going again. And that's generally the story of Hearts and Souls. It's a superhero game about a person who has been imbued or discovered or learned some sort of extreme ability, and they want to use that to change the world. Their heart and their soul are put into making a difference in the world. And that's always been Hearts and Souls' story. That's why it's not named after the superhero team or the super setting I'm using. That's why it's not named something, more alliterative, because I love alliteration. You must understand alliteration and I are hand in hand good friends, as are anagrams. So you will find a lot of anagrams in the book, and you may find some alliteration, but yeah, just going to say, bear with me, because it's in there. But stress isn't supposed to be light. It's literally because you have not willingly availed yourself of either bantering with another person or in your own head, having a little conflict story, or a monologue where you're like trying to inspire yourself, or even having another player try and help you banter or give you some sort of leadership speech to get you a reroll. And the rerolls are important because Hearts and Souls assumes that as long as you get a positive success on the die, whatever that target number is, as long as you get 1, you have succeeded in avoiding something horrible happening. Now, if you give up, if you don't keep trying to roll that die, even if it costs a lot of stress to keep rolling until you get a success, then something bad is going to happen. But these bad things, although I talk about damage and a few other things in the game, they're meant to be as much the ability to create a story hook as they are harm to a character. Now, harm is the easiest way to use it, but they can be used as a story hook. Maybe you're knocked into a building and the building collapses on you in part, and now you have to go rescue other people out of the building. That's fallout. That is the bad stuff that happens. It has made the situation a little bit worse, and it's up to you to solve it. You can also put stress on your relationships with other people, whether they're good guys or bad guys, because you're expected to have a little bit of both in the relationships you create. You can even have relationships with stuff. If you have a base or you have a starship, you can pour some of your stress into that if the situation is framed right. In an example game, we were playing space opera, and my character got his ship shot. Rather than taking that stress myself, since I was not doing very well at piloting out of the way, I decided it took the stress, and the fallout was going to be that the person who originally owned the ship would find out about it. And she would be angry enough to send bounty hunters after my character. Story hook. Okay, so I literally had my character after the game, because that was his fallout, was his ship was damaged a little, scorched and scuff marked. It wasn't a lot of stress, but it was enough to want to make something happen. So I made something happen as a player, not as a GM. And what happened as a player was that we decided that my character's ex-wife, who lost the starship in our divorce, got pictures of what the starship looked like now. Wasn't major damage, but he wanted to taunt her, and it helps create that hook to bring her into the story. And that is really what stress is about. You're paying stress to succeed at getting your face, avoiding getting your face smushed in, but you're paying that forward to a potential plot hook. That plot hook might be a broken arm, it might be a cold, it might be falling into a coma and having an entire dream adventure with your friends that, they don't even realize they're involved in, but you still play out at the table. But it's all about generating more story, giving your character a way to explain away fallout, giving your character a way. For example, let's say you decide, okay, the guy hits me. I take it. I'm hurt. I've got a cracked rib, but I have triggered my own fallout. So I am slammed into that building on about the 5th floor, and I just smash through it. And I tear up desks and rubble, and the ceiling collapses. So now, here is the thing. You're out of that fight temporarily. You can choose to immediately come back to the fight, but there are people who may be hurt in there. So here is a hook to keep you out of that fight just a little bit longer and let the other members, the other superheroes you team with, deal with it. Now, in some cases, that may happen to 1 or 2 or 5 characters at once. So it's possible that you're all dealing with other things and the villain gets away. But Hearts and Souls is about being willing to, when you put on a cape or you put on a cowl, you put on your domino mask in character, you are willing to take that risk. You are willing to push yourself so hard that it makes things worse for you. That does not necessarily mean it's having a broken arm or having a broken leg. And that's how I've seen it used a lot. But that's not what it's really intended to be. Stress in the game is designed to create story hooks. So the more ways you can think of to expend it to create story hooks, putting it into relationships, putting it in, like, the media might not like you. You might be some sort of alien, and the media's like, oh, aliens. So you put it into a new relationship you decide you have with the media, and you just add it right then, and dump that into the media, and the media's, oh, you're such a destructive alien. But that's what Hearts and Souls is about. That's the story of Hearts and Souls. Hearts and Souls is about playing characters who are willing to stand up, put on a costume, fight evil, and face the repercussions for doing good. Because there are repercussions for doing good. It's never as smooth. But you also get, in return, you change the world. Just a little bit. Now, Hearts and Souls setting is, look out that window. It's dark outside. You can't see anything except maybe that little desk. There's an old desk out there, and it has this seal-up cabinet, and the wind just keeps blowing it. It's really would be spooky if that kind of stuff bothered me, because you see it fade in and fade out. But the truth is, the whole purpose of the Hearts and Souls mechanics are to create that story, that conflict that you see in a certain kind of comic books during what I generally consider early Bronze Age, late Silver Age, when the Comics Code Authority was beginning to lessen, but it wasn't gone. So while characters could punch each other and fight, there was not overtly sexual, high-end sex. They're not showing it on the page. They're not, they may fade to black. They may just show you under the covers. Very much PG-13 kind of comic book stuff. And that's really what I grew up on. And I'm seeing comic books now that I'm like, and they're trying to sell this to children? No. I think they realize that they have adult audiences. But it's also important to remember that comic books are an easy way to get kids to read, especially with the popularity of movies of superheroes these days. Getting them more stories about these characters they see on the silver screen can be a big boon, especially to help them if they're having trouble reading. I did not have trouble reading. I understood the big words Spider-Man, Peter Parker, did when he was a college student. Because he was a college student when I read mostly about him. Most of the stuff prior to that was before my time period of reading comics. The first comic book I ever read, that stuck in my mind was a Fantastic Four issue, in which basically Reed is telling his friend, who's a scientist, that the device he's created could be dangerous, and not to do any experimentation with it until they could get something worked out. Well, he gets mugged, after Mr. Fantastic leaves, he's dying. So he goes to use this machine, which is supposed to help evolve the human race, and uses it on himself. And he becomes this tall, alien-like, big-headed guy with psychic powers. But apparently he's not psychic enough. I mean, he can turn people into flies and rats and other things. But he's not psychic enough to perceive Blastar tricking him into making him believe that the Fantastic Four are out for him. But he's also one of the first people that watches as Franklin Richards, who was alive at this time, because this was a 70s comic, had powers as a, 2.5, 3, or, whatever time age he was. He was 4 years old and 5 years old later, but at this time period, he wasn't even that old. And he sees his mama down, and his eyes glow, and he chucks Blastar back into the negative zone like it was nothing. And that hyper-evolved man is like, this is one to watch kind of mentality. And then I think he leaves. I don't remember the exact conclusion of the story, but I think he leaves the Earth to explore the universe. And I actually have a character loosely inspired by him in a far future, end of the universe kind of game that I'm playing that a friend wrote, just to, here's a random time, and here's, make a character that fits it. So I made a character who's this hyper-evolved character. And among other things, he can shapeshift. He's gender fluid, sexuality fluid. I mean, he can shapeshift. He can be anything humanoid he wants to be. And his entire world is at peace. His entire universe is at peace. It's all about pursuing your artistic passions. It's not a dead culture at all. It's just a culture that has turned away from moving forward and into a little bit of hedonism. And I had a great fun with it. One of my friends found out that was the character I was playing because I was flirting with other player characters, and he's like, he expected this other character to be mine because it sounds like something I would normally play. And the friend who did that surprised him. Then he finds out that I'm playing this, me, I'm playing this character who's pretty much just out there. Weird, strange, alien to everyone else. And he tries, when he realizes the flirting isn't working, he then tries to comfort them. And that's just weirding them out too, because he is fundamentally so alien from 1,000,000 AD, or 1,000,000 Common Era, as the current time scientists prefer, than using, the idea that Christ was born as a time thing. Anyway, for the record, I'm a believer, I'm a man of faith, so if you don't want to buy games from a man of faith, don't. That's fine by me. I buy games from people who have opinions I disagree with, but not so much so that, them saying, oh, I'm an atheist, or I'm gay, or any of these other things would bother me. None of that does, by the way, for the record. In fact, I'm an LGBTA plus supporter. I support people's right to believe what they want, even if that's atheism or Islam. I support people's gender, whatever it is. But I'm definitely unusual for a Christian man. I am sort of like, left. Here's the left, the democratic left. And here's progressive left. And then somewhere over here, way off the completely, if the planet were flat, I'd have fallen off into, if I'd walked that way. But that's just me. I'm very, very liberal Christian man. But Hearts and Souls, that's one reason Hearts and Souls is the kind of game it is, because I want to make a game where the choices characters make matter on an individual level. They're saving lives, they're doing good, they're trying their best to do what's right. Like the comic books that I read as a kid. And still, some of the comic books I read today still focus on that a little bit. Although what's doing what's best is not always the same thing for everyone. For example, my favorite comic book is Astro City. I have read Astro City for years, and sometimes what's best for this character who's technically superpowered is not to put on a cape and fight crime. Sometimes that's just, that's not the best thing. But for Hearts and Souls, that's the story. It's of those people who are willing to step up, put on cape and cowl, and take out evil. And sometimes, believe it or not, sometimes in some games, you can talk people out of evil. I've had that happen in Hearts and Souls in the past. I've had people who were sympathetic to the evil someone was doing. An example I will give you is in one game, there were these giant black and white monsters attacking the town. And they were appearing usually in civilized areas where a lot of money was. Malls, big shopping centers with major stores, etc. And the superheroes go and they examine things, and they find out that it's a little boy who's doing this. And he's only ever seen television in black and white because he's very, very poor. He knows color television exists. He's probably seen a little bit here and there, but his power is the ability to make some of these images real enough to be interacted with. So he makes Godzilla, or, whatever shows on that he thinks about, that he brings up. And they find out his dad is the one making him do this so his dad can come in behind him and steal all this money to try and find them a better place because they're living in a van. And the players find that out, and they're heartbroken. I mean, one, how could you do that to your son? And he's like, I didn't want to. I've done my best. I've looked for a job. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and I've done this. And two, they're like, well, crap, we have to solve the problem in a different way. We can't just punch him out. What's that going to do? It's a little kid and a grown man who are having financial troubles. No, they haven't chosen the right way to solve that, but we're superheroes. So they help him get the help he needs. They help the kid go somewhere to get training to deal with the fact that he has superpowers, and they help the man with a leg up on finding a job, helping him find a place to stay. And that is not something that happens in a lot of superhero games. A lot of times it's just punch out the bad guy. But I have conflict that rise above that from time to time. And I do. I like conflicts that aren't solvable by punching people. But sometimes, at the same time, my personal opinion is if I could punch out evil, I certainly would punch out evil. But that is the same. I like the variance, the entire spectrum or continuity of conflict that a game can create and the alternate solutions that characters may come up with. In another example, I had a character who in that setting was the equivalent of the Hulk, big, super strong thing that just went on rampages. Well, the player characters find out that he's really a 4-year-old throwing a tantrum. He just happens to grow to immense size, hugely muscular, can bounce, tank shells off his chest. But they find out he's 4. And they're watching him. He is taking a fire engine and he's using it it's still big for him because he's only 7.5, 8 feet tall. And he's playing with it. And they realize he's a child at this point. So one of them, who happens to be a werepanther, turns into a panther and goes up and pretends to be a kitty for him. The kitty's scaled to him and calms him down, and he eventually turns back into just a normal little toddler, a 4-year-old. And those are the kinds of games, the kinds of stories that I like to tell with superhero games. It's not always about punching evil, but sometimes it's about punching evil. So stress is part of the heart and soul's mechanic that's important because it creates the ability to generate more conflict in the future, because it's here to generate trouble, because it's here to generate things you have to overcome. It's not a punishment, despite what a particular group of players of mine had thought it was. It's not. It's not really a punishment. It's meant to be, okay, at the very least, you can still get a success and dodge out of the way of this monster's attack for a small price of potential future bad things happening. And I may have overdone it in second edition. I may have made stress a little too easy to come by. And I'm going to work on that, because while other players I have play tested second edition with have not had the issues they've had, the dice have just punished them mercilessly. And that's the thing. I went through and mathematically designed the percentages of the second edition. And I forgot, because there is a game out there that I have played that is mathematically correctly, over the course of 100 million games, it should even out to be that your person is successful this often. Problem is, in play, we didn't see that. We saw a lot of failure. And I let that mathematics, for me, do that in Hearts and Souls. So I need to reel back closer to the original mechanics in terms of numbers. Not exactly, but I have found a way I think is a better balance between the two extremes, between too much stress and too little stress. And my idea is basically making it, instead of being the player character's threshold, it being the villain's threshold, and allowing players to try and roll a success even against beings much more powerful than them. So it makes the game a little more fluid in some ways, and a little more amorphous, which I'm not always fond of, but it will allow a normal human person to punch a cosmic person. May not be a good thing in your particular game. So there will be an optional rule to make it grittier, less, oh yeah, I can't believe that such and such beat up such and such. So there will be an optional rule to go, let's rein that down a little. But as it stands right now, I think that will work, because even the cosmic level character's threshold is 6. And the starting dice for a normal human character is 1d6. So that's a very small percent chance for a normal, average human to actually do anything that can cause stress to a cosmic powered being. But that doesn't mean it can't happen entirely. Maybe you catch them unawares. Maybe you say just the right thing that ticks them off. I don't know. I'm going to let some more playtesting happen and see where it goes from there. But that's the thing with me, is that I have actively played this game, run second edition, since I started working on it. And I pretty much have not changed the rules beyond adding bantering, because somebody was like, I had an idea, I'm going to add bantering. And they're like, I always wondered why you didn't have that. I'm like, well, why didn't you say something? It's helpful to me if people talk back and tell me things. Even sometimes they make me mad, and sometimes they upset me. And a lot of times that's just the way, because especially when it's text messages, you don't always get things right. But this way, I think it allows villains to be tough. You're fighting a constant villain and you're just a normal human being, stat-wise, or even your power is scaled on the human scale, you're going to have a tough time of it. Even with, even if you're at the top end of the human scale with an astounding human strength, and you're trying to punch a cosmic being, it may not end up well for you. But this way, the thresholds are kept somewhat challenging for more powerful villains. It brings in the villain side, because before you were challenging yourself, and now you're being challenged by someone else. You can still be challenged by yourself in some situations. But this way, it actually makes sense for villains to have stats, whereas before it didn't really make sense because their stats don't much matter except for what kind of stress they can ignore. And, before they could just pretty much, the little human could punch all day and they would ignore it. Now there's still a chance that one of those punches do actually hit a nerve, or those words just catch their ear and makes them angry. I'm going to playtest this and we're going to see how it works. Because believe me, I am not a person who wants a game to go out without having playtested it and playtested it and playtested it and playtested it. And my friend goes, well, we played thousands of hours. And I just facepalmed. I mean, I literally went, oh my God. Do you understand I put in 10 times the amount of playtesting in just second edition than those thousands of hours of playing the game? No, he really didn't understand that. And that's okay. He doesn't understand that, like I have an active online gaming that I have done and have done it for a while. Although we do switch games from time to time. It's not always Hearts and Souls. But I playtested and playtested and playtested. And there are some situations where, I have to go back and step back and let my emotions go and go, okay, maybe he is onto something. Maybe I am wrong. I didn't think I was because no one else has had this problem with this one particular group of players who I play with face to face most of the time. But I have actually seen their dice rolls. I've witnessed the dice. And it's very, very, very frustrating to watch the dice, which statistically speaking should not fail over and over and over again. I mean, mechanically speaking, just examining the statistics of it, they should have rolled at least one success. And when they try again, they should have rolled at least one success. And then they tried again, and they should have rolled at least one success. Because statistically speaking, that's how the math is meant to work. But the math does not meet up with actual human activity. And I had to remember that from that old game long ago that I played that just infuriated me because it just did not work. You sit down and you try and you try and you try and you try and you're not getting any successes unless you've min-maxed your character. And I don't want that to be a thing. I don't like min-maxing your characters. I think that it's, if you're min-maxing characters, there's something wrong with the system that says that you have to be doing that. And that is not uncommon because I see that in D&D games where people have just rolled sheer average stats. And this is older version of D&D. This is not current 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. But in older versions of D&D, you had a basic D&D, where I started. Basic D&D, everybody had a +1 to hit. Yay. But if you didn't have a statistic that was above a certain number, you didn't get anything else. So you had a +1 to hit. And the vast majority of things you would be fighting tended to have low armor classes. And few hit points. But even then, the dice can still fail you. You've got a pretty good chance with that +1. But now we're talking about much higher numbers in 5th edition with hit points and with attack roll ratings because combat rating seems to be tied more to hit points than the actual supernatural powers of the creature. Because our challenge rating, whatever you want to call CR. Because I've had a party virtually on the run from Shadows, which are in 5th edition a challenge rating 1/2 monster. So you can put 2 against 4 people who are 1st level. These people were 3rd level characters, 2nd or 3rd. And there were, I think, 5 of them. There's supposed to be 6, but there were 5. And they were having problems with 2 shadows. But that's because they weren't affecting hit points. It was harder. And their one magic user was gone, so they were stuck with limited magical resources at that time. And nobody had yet branched off into another, like an Eldritch Knight or, one of the spellcasting fighter types. But, again, luck of the dice matters sometimes. Sometimes there are people who can't roll to save themselves. I have literally watched it. I have a friend who, until we played a very certain game, could not roll a success on anything. His best stat ever rolled in any game was in a very particular fantasy game that had a physical beauty stat. And that stat he rolled fantastically. Now, I could have made that character work. He would have just gone and charmed and charmed and charmed and charmed, and he would have a small armored guard of the most beautiful women he could find. Oh, you're so wonderful for protecting me. I love you all, each and every one. I could have made it work, but it's not really his play style. And that's okay, we all have different play styles and different things we like. But sometimes we have to balance the play style versus rules, and that's where conflict can come in. Because Hearts and Souls has a huge abstraction when it comes to stress. Stress is not the bad stuff happening to you. It is the bad stuff building up that happens to you. It's the worry, it's the concern, it's the nicks and scratches of both emotional and physical, and the drain, the fatigue. It's all the little bitty bits of stuff that, when it gets triggered, makes you fail at something you should have succeeded at. And it can be done. Like, the GM can go, okay, you rolled enough, bam, you take all that. And this is what happens. But, and to be fair, with any game that has these kinds of abstractions, or even with games that do not have these kinds of abstractions, I strongly suggest you talk to the players in advance about your expectations of what this stuff means. For me, stress triggers are meant to be plot hooks. Yeah, sometimes I'll break a character's arm. Sometimes I'll put a bullet in his lung. But I would much prefer it spin off into something else. Maybe you have to find a particular healing thing. And in fact, the last time I was running the game, I had a player get very frustrated. The circumstances are, they're too personal to discuss, but they got frustrated and just got upset. And I wanted to try and explain to them that, let me do this with your character temporarily because of the stress you've taken. But they had already thrown up their hands. And that's okay, because I understand their frustration. I've been there. There are games that do that to me. But I just wanted to give him an out that wouldn't be long-term hurtful, but would create a plot hook. And he didn't give me the chance to do that. And that has a lot on me as a GM, because I didn't talk to them in advance I didn't know I was going to have that person as a player. And I didn't get to talk to them in advance about how this stuff can play out. Sudden surprise player, plus not taking the time to separate it out and make sure he understood where everything was at. I proved a particularly powerful character that he played, and he got frustrated when it was somewhat limited, but there are limits to some things when you start using like a superhero game for another genre, which is what we were doing, that the power levels get condensed. Because what cosmic means in a superhero game and what cosmic means in a space opera game are somewhat different. On the other hand, I did allow him to do some fantastic stuff when there was nothing to oppose him, really, because if nothing's opposing you, you should be able to do amazing stuff. It's only when there's something that's actively against you that it should be harder. It's the only time you should ever have to roll dice, really. I mean, I shouldn't even made him roll dice for the first thing. Just, sure, go ahead. It happens. But, again, my mistakes. I'm willing to accept that I make mistakes. But Hearts and Souls is coming along. Playtesting has continued and playing has continued. And I'm still working on it, trying to make sure I've got that right balance. And that's the biggest thing for me, is I want it to be the ultimate version of the game. Because, and here's something that I have not told many people. Once I get Hearts and Souls finished, I really would like to make it open content, either under Creative Commons nonprofit, or just Creative Commons of some kind of system. But I want to make it where you can take the system and do any kind of game you want with it. And you can write your settings up and publish them. You can write, but the rules are yours when I'm done. At least I'm not making a contract right here. I still have to work out those details. So bear with me while I work out those details. But the rules will be for anyone who wants to use them. While the character designs, the art, all that stuff remains with those license holders and, me when I pay for it and it's mine, my character designs, etc. But like an artist, I pay for art and I'm paying for its use rather than owning it, then that art is still theirs. So the complicated issues of game design, art, I should probably do one on that, because art's expensive. And it's not like I'm saying art is unfairly expensive. It's not. Those guys work hard. Those gals work hard. They, whoever they are, who are neither gal nor guy, or who are both, or who are whatever, they all work hard. And they take years and years and years and years of hard work and talent to produce something. And so should deserve a reasonable compensation for it. I just happen to be a poor game designer. So part of the reason I'm doing Kickstarter when I do get to Kickstarter is because I'm poor and I need you to help me pay to make it a beautiful game. That's the main thing. Making the game beautiful. Making it look wonderful in layout, making sure it's edited, and my jabbering stream of consciousness is in much better sorted phrasing because, I will go back and do that work myself, but I still want an editor to go through and go, oh, look, you babbled here. You probably need to cut that out. Not more of a content editor than an actual text editor, but I'm paying for a text editor. We'll see about a content editor at that point if we get the Kickstarter. But the long end of the day is those people work hard. Artists work hard. Writers work hard. You have no idea how much work I put into this game over the years. And yeah, it's taken me years. And part of that is I'm bipolar depressive. There are days when getting out of bed should come with a little achievement glowing above my head. But, I'm here. I'm talking about it. I'm willing to talk to you about it. I'm willing to tell you about my stories, babble at you. And I'm willing to listen because I've been in the place where the only option sounded like dying was good. And that is not a good option. It sounds good because your depression, if you have it, lies. It lies and lies and lies and lies and lies. It can turn even good things into bad things in your head. And it's a struggle that so many people go through. That's why I talk about it. I'm not going to lie to people and say, oh, no, I'm just fine. There are days when I'm not just fine. Today, I'm okay. I played with a dog. Well, of course, I was up till 6 a.m. and just went and played with the dog because he needed to be taken care of. I had my own dogs to play with. I did a little more cleaning and rearranging because my bookshelves collapsed. All my game books, all my trade paperbacks were on the floor. And I got some help to finally pull out the debris and make sure the books were okay, because the books were the important part. The shelves were not. And set up some new bookshelves. And so I've got books all over this room. And I have not gotten a single new book put up on that shelf since yesterday. But I have managed to make this video. I have managed to eat, feed my dogs, take my dogs out, take someone else's dog out, make sure they were fed, make sure their cat was taken care of, and generally just ran my day. I mean, it's 11 o'clock now. And then I played a game, but it was interrupted by network interruptions. And then discussed gaming with my other gaming group because one person was a little bit late. And we just started talking about games. And, you know, that happens. And I babble. So, you know, that kind of took all our game time. We only have 2 hours. So, but we all babble. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you just got to get the stuff up here out. That's why I tell people I am bipolar depressive, type 2, hypomanic, with no psychosis. I don't hear voices. If I did, I would start worrying. Although characters in my fictional works have begun talking to me in my sleep, which worries me, because it's not happened before, but I think it's because I'm frustrated in writing them, and they are trying me out, because my sister, who is allegedly completely sane, and who I generally believe is much more stable mentally than I am, give or take. No, but my younger sister, she says her characters talk to her. And a lot of authors I've talked to say their characters talk to them. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I know that in my dreams, I've got characters who are showing up and telling me their stories so that I will write them down. Because that seems to be the only way my brain can convince the back brain to convince the forebrain to go type. Anyway, this is almost an hour-long video. I hope you will take time to watch all of it. I don't know when I'm going to do the next one, but I do want to do one on game design again. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about. Because Game Design 101 has been my most popular video, and I may want to address class-based games, because there's nothing wrong with class-based games. It's just if you've only played class-based games and you're using that as an argument about how your game is different, you probably need to play more games, because there are a lot of non-class-based games, which I like. I like them both. Sometimes they work for one, sometimes they work for another, sometimes they don't work at all. Some people don't like them at all. Me, I'll take one, I'll try it, see what works, see if it doesn't work, see, whatever. I am more than willing to try all sorts of different games, and I'm willing to try games with strange mechanics or traditional mechanics or whatever. So I babbled on and on and on. So I hope you're still here. I hope you're still good. I hope your health is well, both physically and mentally. I love you guys. I mean, I love you, humanity. Sometimes you are a pain, but I love you, even if you're a pain. God bless you. God bless you, everyone. And yes, my name is Tim, so that's just a really, really weird thing to say, but, and I do mean that. I do mean everyone. Even if there's some people I don't like out there, certain politicians, certain public officials, certain political bends, I still do want God to bless you. I want God to bless people who don't believe in Him. I want God to bless people who believe in Him in a different way, or, are like me, because I used Him, but I don't normally use Him in my subconscious. My foreconscious is just, that's how I was raised. Me, He's a genderless spirit being. There's no he or she, there's just God. So, for that revelation, we have to look at language and the way language shapes our thoughts and a whole bunch of other things that are, completely off the topic of this video. So, thank you. Peace. Good gaming. Love. And I hope your dreams come true. I do. Good night.